evening and welcome to the June 18th, 2009 Select Board meeting. We know that the meeting has been properly warned because we entered into executive session at 5:45. Okay. First thing that we will do this evening is look for an approval for the meeting minutes for Tuesday, June 4th.
I'll make a motion to approve the June 4th meeting minutes.
Okay, Tim's made a motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. You're going to notice tonight that we are very short on members. We do have a quorum here this evening. It is our tradition that the chair does not make motions, and so Liz and Tim are going to be super busy this evening, which is going to be fun for me to watch. Great.
We're up to the challenge.
That's right. Okay, so we will move on now to chair's remarks. I actually am going to defer my remarks this evening to Peter Elwell, which will fall under manager's comments, which is next anyway. Peter?
Thank you, Brandy. I appreciate having the opportunity, since I'm going to have three separate things to announce tonight. I'll try to be quick. We have a long agenda. But I'm really excited, first and foremost, to introduce our Human Resources Director, Sally Nix, has joined the team. Sally's first day was yesterday. She and her husband are moving to Brattleboro from north central Massachusetts, where she served the Fitchburg public school system for over 23 years. We really appreciate the HR expertise and positive spirit that she's bringing to our team already. Hitting the ground running.
Yes.
Thanks, Sally. And Thursday evening this week, there is a public forum. There's been a fair amount of publicity around this, thank goodness, so we're hoping that there'll be a really good turnout from the community. But we wanted to take this opportunity to remind everyone that a public forum organized by the Brattleboro Fire Department and Brattleboro Memorial Hospital will be held at our Central Fire Station on Elliott Street on June 20th, Thursday evening from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. The community is invited to come join the conversation with health, medical, mental health, and law enforcement authorities as we search for solutions to this health crisis that affects our whole community. The panel will consist of representatives from the Brattleboro Memorial Hospital, Project CARE, Turning Point, Groundworks, the Brattleboro Retreat, the High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area, and Windham County State's Attorney. Thanks again to Chief Bacassi and members of our fire department for the important organizing role that they played in this and for hosting the event on Thursday night.
Thank you.
And finally, just a reminder to the community that in July of this year, rather than a first and third Tuesday, as we usually do each month, there will be one July Select Board meeting. It'll be on the second Tuesday, and that's July 9th. So one July Select Board meeting this year on July 9th. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Peter. Are there other members out of the two of you that have committee reports or just general comments to make this evening? No, thank you.
I will say that I'm definitely planning on being there on the 20th. I think there's a lot of excitement, if that's the proper word, but anticipation for a lot of folks to show. So hopefully you have enough chairs there at the Central Fire Station. And I'm just curious, just occurred to me, is there a chance we'll have to warn this, or
I'm
as
going
far
to be
as
there as well.
attendance? of
No,
the select board?
so it's not a Select Board meeting where you'll be discussing this matter with each other.
Great.
It's a public forum where if 3 or 4 or all 5 of you are there, we have no violation of the Open Meetings Act.
Thank you.
Excellent. Good question,
Just like
Tim.
to
Thank
check
you.
in with that once in a while.
Yeah, there was a provision added to the open meeting law last year that allows board members to attend another
Oh.
meeting without warning.
Fantastic.
So you're within the law.
Thank you.
That's how Tim likes to be.
Yes.
Okay.
Got color in the lines.
Yeah,
It's
I know.
that kind of guy.
It's nice. This is the time in the meeting where we're going to open up public participation. This is an opportunity for members of the public to speak about something that is not listed on tonight's agenda. Emily, please state your name and all of that stuff for the camera.
I'm gonna adjust the microphone for my shortness first. Thank you. Hi, I'm Emily Kornheiser, and I'm here as the Director of Workforce Development at Youth Services this evening.
Great.
And I have some breaking news, which is why I'm not on the agenda, that I wanted to let you all know about.
Ooh.
Yeah, so for give a little bit of background for folks who don't have the background, but I don't want to take up too much time. So for, I think, more than a year, we've been having conversations in the community about something like a day labor program, an opportunity for folks who are not interested and or not ready for, or their lives just don't allow the regular day-to-day 40-hour-a-week work with a regular schedule, whether that's because of mental health issues or transportation issues or the vagaries of the universe, essentially. An opportunity for folks to access paid work. And so we've been working on how to set up a program like that, knowing that this is something that actually hasn't been done other places in the country. There are day labor programs other places in the country that I'm sure most of us are familiar with that are fairly exploitive. You know, a bunch of people jump in the truck, or you line up outside of an office every morning, but there's a huge cut taken off the top by the folks who are providing the employment services. There's a lot of contractor situations, things like that. We wanted to set up a program where folks could access work when they were ready for it, and for as long as they needed, that met existing labor laws in Vermont, and that met people's needs with dignity. So making sure that we were within the law, both in terms of the letter and the spirit of the law for the Department of Labor, and also protecting people's labor rights, which are not always the same thing. We really wanted to come together on that. And so in Youth Services, in collaboration and conversation with Groundworks, has been researching this for quite a while. And as we've had a new workforce development department at Youth Services, that's really designed around meeting needs of people who are not served by traditional labor services. We were the likely place to host this program. And in this time, we've been examining how workers' comp might work in a situation like this, how people having identification to fill out employment paperwork might work, what a cash economy might look like and still protecting people's tax liability. And then what kind of support services we would want to have available for a program like this in order to have it both meet people's needs but not be sort of readily accessible at the same time. So many employment services are designed so that someone comes in the door and they have to follow a series of steps and then they exit into paid employment, paid full-time employment. And we didn't want to set up a program that was someone enters at A and exits at E. We want to set up a system where people can enter at B, exit at B, enter at B, exit at D, enter at D, exit at B. You can do the whole alphabet together backwards and forward. But it was important to us that something was really able to meet people's needs with dignity, as well as be sort of a connections first, meeting people where they are in their life with what they need. And so I'm here to announce that we are ready to move forward. We have resolved issues around how to access workers' comp. We have set up a separate L3C organization within, sort of connected to Youth Services. That's a mission-driven, separate organization. So the goals of the organizations will always be about meeting people's job needs and employment needs with connection and dignity and all of that. But we can really focus our resources and our attention on a much sort of simpler set of books than the enormous system of youth services and all of our federal contracts. So really dividing up some of the complication and risk. So we've set up the L3C now. We've figured out workers' comp. We've figured out payroll. And we're really ready to take the next step in terms of putting forward a proposal with the town to fund this program and to start, if we sign on the dotted line together, start the program in a couple months.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Do you want to say something more?
I just wanted to thank you, Emily, for your work and your group's work.
Thank you for all of your support and interest in this program.
Yeah, and obviously, we have a lot we'd probably like to say, but we're supposed to have it on the agenda so that everybody can have a community conversation. But I'm very happy with the progress. I'm actually thrilled.
And I'm sure that you'll connect with Peter about a time to have it on the agenda so we can have a robust conversation. But I do want to thank everybody involved for sticking with the complexity of the work.
Absolutely.
And I'm excited. Thank you.
Thank you. And one final thing I want to add is just sort of explain for anyone who's listening in the TV audience or people who are here who I might not have had this conversation with before, that essentially we'd have people going to sort of a set location who are ready and interested in working that day. We'd have a case manager on duty there. That person would transport folks who are working to various locations that we'd set up in partnership with those employers, one of whom might be the town. And then we would provide lunch. During lunch, we would have the opportunity for people to access more social services, whether that was applying for food stamps, having a counseling session, or just spending time together. And then people would return to their workday, and then we would bring them back to sort of a central site. So that's what the day would look like for people, and then we would pay people cash at the end of the day.
Thank you for that further insight. That's great to know. I look forward to discussing this more on a future agenda.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Emily.
Thank you.
Josh, please state your name and introduce yourself to Cameraland.
Josh Davis from Brattleboro. I'm also the director of Groundworks Collaborative. I'm here in support of Emily and the Jobs Program, and just want to underscore how much we at Groundworks support this effort. You know, for us, it started about 2 years ago in this room. We came and we were speaking about, with Chief Fitzgerald, about panhandling in town. A couple different ideas were born of that select board meeting. Project CARES was one of them. The Jobs Program was another. And little did I know at that meeting how complex the Jobs Program was going to be. If you just listen to what Emily laid out, it's really complex to thread the needle of the legal requirements of it, but also the dignity of it. And so I want to commend Emily and everybody at Youth Services for taking this up when Groundworks, when it kind of got to the edge of what we felt comfortable we could do. But I really didn't want to let go of this, and so I'm very pleased that we're going to be able to move forward with next steps and coming up with a way for people to be connected and make a contribution in this town in a different way. And so at Groundworks, we're really excited, so thank you.
That's great. Thanks, Josh.
Thank you.
Okay. Kip?
Hello, I'm Captain Tewksbury from Brattleboro Time Trade. We are on the agenda and want to talk about the Brattleboro Time Trade in cooperation with the Windham Solid Waste Management District and Post Oil Solutions. At the moment, we're looking for further partners. We have something much less ambitious to do, but we want to organize a repair cafe in October. I've already made arrangements for space, and I don't know how many people were familiar with it, but a repair cafe is actually is a trademark name and is a set and comes with a whole set of procedures for how to set it up and run it. Basically, we wanted to ask the town just to, I don't know, sort of give it their blessing, as it were, and we would hope that at some point, communication with town workers could go out for anybody who would, among town employees who thought they had skills that they would like to be technicians to help in the repair cafe. So part of the real work setting that up is to get qualified technicians who will be there for the day to help people with whatever they have. So whoever we get for technical help, whether it's, you know, fixing small appliances, computers, cell phones, any number of things. I know that the community is full of skilled and talented people who often, and that's also part of the time trade notion, who often don't fit into the financial market for those skills, which means they're not available to participants, customers. So it's an extension, I think, of the time trade notion. It's at the moment, we're just planning one event. We're not asking for any money from the town. We will fundraise what we need otherwise, and then people will donate as they see fit when they come to get services. So I'll answer any questions if there are any.
Thanks, Kip. Liz?
Well, I commend you. I think it's a great idea. My daughter participates in what's called Fix-It clinics in Boston.
Ah.
And she brings her sewing machine and her jewelry making tools, and she mends things, and there's MIT professors who fix people's hair dryers there at the same time. It's a very interesting little group. It's only for the morning, and I would imagine that people would be more likely to participate if they didn't have to spend their whole Saturday. So you might want to think about that.
The technical help people,
Right.
yes, well, we're,
Well, just roll
Well,
that
yeah,
in your
yeah.
head for a while.
in March, I went up to Montpelier where they had one and cooperated with Onion River Exchange, which is their time trade with the Central Vermont Solid Waste District, town of Montpelier, the Hunger Mountain Co-op, those things. So I went there and saw they had structured from like noon to 4. So on a Saturday, or might have even been a Sunday. There were like 10 tables, 17 technicians, about at least 20 volunteers kind of doing a number of things. And in the hour or so I was there were at least 25 or 30 people who came with everything from things to sew, cell phones that needed help, lamps to fix, I mean, just all of that. So,
And I would also suggest you speak to our library director, Star Latronica, because she and I have talked about doing something like this, and she might be very helpful
oh,
too.
that'd be great. Yes, I know Star Wells. Yeah.
Great.
Good idea, thank you.
Thank you, Kip. And
You're
I
welcome.
look forward to, at some point, if you want to have a more full and robust conversation, having you listed on the agenda. And otherwise, I commend such an innovative idea. I love it, and I hope it does well.
Yeah, we'll do that when we're further along. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely. Thank you. Are there further comments from community members that are here on topics that are not listed on tonight's agenda? No? Okay. All right. So, in that case, we will move on to transforming ourselves into water and sewer commissioners. Is there a motion?
I'll make that motion
Great.
to become water and sewer commissioners.
Excellent. All those in favor?
Aye.
We are now water and sewer commissioners, like magic. And we have with us tonight Mr. Steve Barrett. Take it away.
So I'm here tonight, the Department of Public Works received the following bids for the Chestnut Hill Reservoir project. One was from Lafayette, from Essex Junction, Vermont, for $23,500. The other bid was from Wadeside Fencing, which is a Brattleboro, Vermont company, for $20,946.30. And we recommend accepting the low bid from Wayside Fencing for $20,946.30. And I'd just like to say that the rehabilitation project is underway at Chestnut Hill, and the crews have relined the piping to the drainage, installed valves, and once we complete fixing the concrete cap and some other cosmetic work, the project will be completed this summer. And the final element of that will be repaving of Chestnut Hill.
Great.
So it should put everything back in order and should look nice when it's all completed.
Thank you, Steve. Do you have any questions or comments from members of the board on this project?
It's not directly related to the fence, but just curious if you could just update us really quickly on the piping that's being done. Is that just for overflow?
That is.
And for
There's
safety?
when we worked with the engineers, the state engineers, they advised a certain overflow for the capacity of that dam. So it never had an overflow pipe before. So this is kind of a mandatory thing to keep the dam. And basically it's a pipe that's connected to the drainage system. Then when it reaches a certain level, it'll overflow into the drainage system.
Great.
And can I ask how long do you think it'll take
That's a good question. I
to
think
fill
it's
that
gonna-
up? And should we have some sort of contest? You know, like you predict when it's going to drop in, like in a frozen lake?
Yes, we should.
Should we have a contest as to who can guess how long it will take to
The question is a good one, and I'd like to explain that because it is going to take some time.
So good, Steve.
It is going to take some time to fill this reservoir, and we don't anticipate using our drinking water that we filtered to fill this reservoir. Although there will be some washdown work that takes place that will fill up some. So amongst ourselves, we have been questioning how long it will take to fill this reservoir.
Excellent. We want in on that.
I think it has about a 3 million gallon capacity. So it's going to take some time.
Well, with any luck, we'll get some hurricanes.
And we've escalated. Okay. Are there,
We won't hold our breath to wait for it to. Thank you, Steve.
are there members of the community who would like to make comments or ask questions about the bid proposals for the Chestnut Hill Reservoir fencing project this evening? None. Okay. So where are we? We need a motion.
I'd be happy to make a motion.
Thanks, Liz.
I make a motion to authorize the town manager, Peter Elwell, to enter into a contract in the amount of $20,946.30 with Wayside Fencing of Brattleboro, Vermont, for installation of a chain link fence around the Chestnut Hill Reservoir.
Excellent. Liz has made the motion to authorize Peter Elwell to enter into the contract with Wayside Fencing for installation of the fence at the Chestnut Hill Reservoir. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Get on it, Steve. We're all over it. Let's see.
Thanks, Steve.
Okay. I would entertain a motion to adjourn as Water and Sewer Commissioners and turn back into regular people.
I'll make that motion.
Excellent. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. All right, we are now up to the financial report for the month of May with John O'Connor.
Thank you, Brandy.
You're welcome, John.
So included in your packet is the May financial report. And as of the end of May, we're 91.7% of the way through the fiscal year.
Great.
And the expenditures stood at 89.9%, so under the target. And if we make our prorations like we do every month for those annual payments that we make, the expenditures come down to 88.8%.
Great.
So we're in good shape as we get to the end of this fiscal year, and should end the year with a positive balance to where we thought the budget would be.
Great.
Utilities fund was at 90.7%, and the parking expenditures were at 98.6%. And again, there's some proration in the utility fund, and if we do those prorations, the expenditures come down to 89.9%. So again, they're doing well there as well. The parking fund's a little over budget. That's the result of the payback or the meters that were replaced. And lot maintenance is over budget, and snow removal was over budget. But I will say that the bottom line in that fund is still better than budget because revenues are also over budget. So the fund is in real good shape.
Great.
Solid waste disposal, our revenues were at 85.8 and expenditures 86.5%. And again, this does not reflect the May or June bag revenues, curbside collection costs, and tipping fees. Those will be recorded the month after May. So the loan report shows that we have $4,185,339 in outstanding loans. And this month, none of the loans were overdue.
Wow.
And we had 2 old loans that were in default, and they are fully reserved for. So no further exposure to the town for those loans.
Great.
Program income, we had $660,829 available for additional grants and loans as of the end of May. And then finally, the grant report gives you various information on 46 active grants and 6 grants that are currently in the application process. So there's a great deal of data included in this financial report, and if you have any questions that I'll try to answer, go right ahead. Other than that, that is the report for the month of May.
Thank you so much, John. Do members
Welcome.
of the board have any questions? Tim?
This time, no, I don't.
Oh my God, Liz.
I bet Liz does. Really?
You better find a question. You got a few minutes. Do
Daniel.
members
Daniel.
of the community have any questions on John O'Connor's May 2019 financial reports? You're running out of time. Fine, you're running out of time to find a
Oh,
question.
no, that's,
Okay, great. All right, so thank you again, John.
You're welcome.
There's no action required on that item.
thank you, John.
Thank you. Our next topic that we're going to move on to is transfer from general fund to the solid waste fund. And Peter, would you like
Thank
to
you.
take that?
Yeah, so when we were reviewing the solid waste budget for FY20 about a month ago, we had some discussion at that time about the fact that we would need to do this year-end transfer one more time. We've adjusted the budget for the solid waste fund for next year in a way that we hope will make it not necessary this time next year to make a supplemental transfer, but based primarily on the continued volatility of the recycling markets, we do have a need to make a $40,000 transfer. At this time, there are more than sufficient funds available in the general fund to make this transfer to the solid waste fund. We are currently projecting that we'll end the fiscal year at least $300,000 to the good compared to budget.
Great.
And recommend tonight that you transfer $40,000 to solid waste.
Excellent, thank you, Peter. Are there questions or comments from members of the board on this item?
No.
No, just to say thanks for the recognition that there's been a little bit of discussion in the community about the recycling changes that every community in the United States, at least, is going through. And I think the Reformer actually did an article, might have been written by that person right over there, which was informative and helped people better understand not only where their recycling goes, but why it's a bit of a struggle right now worldwide. So
Thank you for that, Tim.
just a little exposition there, because I hate to leap right into a vote. But
Yes, no, I'm glad you did that.
Well,
It's less awkward that way.
It's also reflective of the discussion that Peter initiated at our last meeting about where recycling. Where does recycling come from?
Where does it?
Where does it go?
Indeed.
Cotton Eye Joe. Do members of the community have anything that they would like to discuss regarding the transfer of $40,000 from the general fund? Come on up to the microphone. We'll amplify your voice, but it gives you an opportunity, which is mandatory, to introduce yourself to the town.
So nobody knows who I am.
Do it
I'm
anyways.
Fritz Bright, District 3.
Great.
I've been paying attention to the volatility in the recycling world and been an avid recycler, several generation avid recycler.
Excellent.
But I commend the town for subsidizing the recycling. I think the only way we're going to make this work over the long haul is to maintain the resource. And as long as the resource is maintained, there will be people who will take advantage of it when the time is appropriate. And so thank you for keeping up.
Thank you for that. Further comments from members of the community on the transfer of $40,000 from the general fund to the solid waste fund? Okay, hearing none, I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve a transfer of $40,000 from the general fund to the solid waste fund.
Great, Tim has made a motion regarding the transfer of $40,000 from general fund to solid waste fund. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, now we move on to the first reading, which regards Chapter 8, Article 4 of the Rental Housing Registration and Inspection Program. And at this point, I will kick that over to Mr. Peter Elwell.
Thank you, Brandy. So we've had several prior discussions of this. The board's very familiar with it. I think the community is actually very familiar with it as well. Last fall during the budget proceedings, we first discussed whether or not to add some both revenue and expenditures funding to the FY20 town budget in order to actually initiate this program. It was supported by the select board at that time. We, earlier this spring, during the term of the new select board, have had a discussion with the community about how it was taking shape and how we would be bringing forward shortly the ordinance that is before you tonight for first reading. Staff is recommending that you hear public comment on this, as is required during a first reading, and then schedule the matter for second reading and public hearing, final adoption at the July 9th select board meeting. By way of quick summary, since there is so much history to this, but just to make sure that anybody who's catching up to it knows what it's about.
Right.
Under our current, with our current staffing resources, we're only able to get out proactively to inspect rental housing units in Brattleboro approximately once every 10 years. We have ordinances on the books that do require that the rental housing be kept in good condition. There's also state regulations that require that it be safe housing. But we're not as well able to ensure that that is what's happening at each location because of the current funding for inspection services. So when we got looking at how we could step this up to something more intense that would provide a better incentive for those properties, I will say that what we find when we go out is a lot of properties are in fact in good condition. Many times we find minor violations where something is more just something that needs some attention rather than because there's been actual sort of concentrated neglect. But we do find situations where some landlords have not taken proper care of their facilities and that they're actually in disrepair and are unhealthy or unsafe and have more major violations of the rental housing codes. And so in order to make sure that particularly those properties that have struggled to stay in compliance do a better job of doing that, we've created a schedule that would make sure that we're in each apartment proactively and at other rental housing units proactively at least once every 4 years. We also would continue, as we do now, to go out on a complaint basis. So if there's an issue that's raised by a tenant or by a landlord at a property where the landlord believes that there's a tenant that's caused a problem, we're available to go out and inspect those situations and take remedial action. But our schedule that puts us out into these residences on a regular basis, on a pre-scheduled basis, will get us there at least once every 4 years. The more frequent inspections will raise the community standards. It'll increase the safety and the health of the dwellings and result not only in safer living quarters for the tenants, but also in less nuisance to the neighborhoods in the areas where sometimes these buildings become blighted. The cost was a concern to ours. We wanted to make sure that we calibrated this appropriately in stepping up the frequency of inspection to still be an affordable program. We believe that the appropriate way to fund this is through fees to be paid by the landlords, as is typical in an inspection program like this. And so the proposed fee is $75 per unit to be paid on the 1 year out of every 4 when the quadrennial inspection is occurring for that unit. So if you spread that out over the 4-year period, it equates to $1.56 per month per unit, which we believe is a readily affordable fee in order to raise up the standards and keep the housing in safer condition to benefit particularly the tenants, but also the broader community. And so one last thing I would say is this has been modeled on programs that we've seen successfully created and implemented in other communities. Some of those actually charge the fee every year. What we think is the happy medium is to require the registration form to be filed every year so that we stay current on changes at the properties, but to only require the inspection fee once every 4 years when we actually go out to do an inspection. All of that is what is set forth in the ordinance that's before you this evening. If you have any questions about the actual language of the ordinance, Town Attorney Bob Fisher is here to address that. If you have any questions about how the program is going to operate, Lenny Howard, our Assistant Fire Chief, is here. He'll be supervising the additional fire inspectors that'll be funded through the revenue side of this in order to raise our standards in the manner that I've described.
Okay. That's great, Peter. Thank you.
Thank you.
So at this time, I am going to go ahead and open the public hearing on this rental housing registration and inspection ordinance. And I would take comments from the board.
Oh, board first?
I like going board first because usually we're short. Except for you. But you're,
Not getting a lot of love about that stuff.
it's a lot of love here.
Well, I have a couple questions. One thing that's sort of new, I think, since we last discussed it, it was very much draft form before, is we have some details on the yearly registration, correct?
Okay.
And it seems very simple to me. Do I read that right? We haven't
believe it
created a
is.
form yet, right, Chief? But we have sort of the list of things that we need to do. And it seems, that's one concern that I heard from the community, like, is that gonna be a hassle? But it sounds like it'll be a pretty fluid process. Or, sorry, Lenny, you're interrogated, I guess.
If you choose to be interrogated, please introduce yourself.
The form will be on either the fire department's website or the town's website, and they can go in there to be a fillable form. I know there's been some questions in regards, well, if nothing has changed from last year to the year you're filling it out, there will be a place on there that you can mark nothing has changed. But
Right.
we've found quite a bit changes in a year's time in some places, so it's a good thing to do.
Sure. So a couple minutes at the
Yes.
most, yeah.
Thanks, Lynn Howard.
And I think I'll sandwich my questions with a comment.
Yes.
In the middle is the meat of the comment. I think I mentioned last time we discussed this, that I'm a landlord as well, a little bit reluctantly because of circumstances, but I had the fire department come and check. It was the required, it was not going to be, it wasn't every 4 years, but it was a random check, or, no, it wasn't random at all. It has a systematic approach you have. But I found it to be incredibly reassuring. I would have gladly paid my $75 to have that done, because it's reassuring to know that you have someone who's a professional at checking out your tenants' abodes, and I think it's a great thing. Firefighters were polite, and they accommodated my schedule, which I think is still the case. It's still going to be the case going forward. So I was pretty pleased with that, and that really fed into the discussion last time, I think, and my attitude towards supporting the program. And then my question is, how will this affect or not affect properties such as Airbnb rentals, which we all know are coming fast and furious?
We all
in our
stare at
town?
Bob
Yeah.
Fisher.
That will not be, that's not part of here because of the definition of what is the rental unit here. But I think those are going to be being addressed through state legislation, which we're looking at and keeping at least an eye on what the state is doing. But this would not apply to inspections that go to every Airbnb. There are commercial fire code inspections that the fire department does on public buildings and places of public accommodation. Airbnb falls sort of in between that. So they go out and they'll do their regular inspections on hotels and inns, things like that, restaurants. But the Airbnb is where things fall through the cracks under the current state legislation. So I think that's being addressed on the state level, but that's not part of this particular ordinance. And if I may, while I'm speaking,
You may.
in the questions or frequently asked questions, on the second page there is one mistake, and we apologize for that. It says, what happens after the inspection? It says, depending on what the inspection finds, if more than 5 major violations are found within a unit or the common areas, that unit or building can be declared uninhabitable. That actually is not more than 5. If there are any major violations as they're defined, can result, if they're not immediately fixed, in the unit being rendered uninhabitable. If there are more than 5 minor violations, then a conditional certificate of habitability can be issued once
those minor violations are corrected. So it's very typical, as the town manager said, that when a rental unit is inspected, to find minor violations. So we split that 5 and fewer. So long as they're fixed, it can go right ahead, you get your certificate. If there's more than 5 minor ones, it may take a little bit longer, and the fire department may say you have 30 days or 45 days to get those things in order, but then a conditional certificate would be issued for 1 year if there's more than 5. So the incentive is to keep your violations, if any, to as few as possible. So I just wanted to point out that one inconsistency in that when I ask questions.
Thank you for the clarifying information on the Airbnb and for the bringing our attention to what's a pretty important language change. Thank you. Liz?
Yes. I just wanted to mention that at town meeting, this initiative was approved, and that this ordinance is following up on that town meeting action. And I'm wholly supportive of this. I think it's definitely something that is a health and safety measure.
Great, thank you for that. Okay, I would at this time like to open this up to members of the community. And remember that not only are we here to hear you, but also Len is here for questions, and Bob is here for questions, and Peter as well. So who wants to go first? Okay, come right up to the microphone, Jason, introduce yourself.
Good evening, I'm Jason Cooper. I am a property manager in town, and certainly anything that improves the quality of the housing in this town I'm all in support of, and is something that's good for the town, and I support. I have some questions about this. One is, this is bringing bureaucracy and costs into this program, and the question is, how will we know it's successful? How will we know if it accomplishes anything? Is there any way of quantifying, for instance, right now we're talking about avoiding dangerous and unsafe conditions and public health risks. Is there a way to quantify what we have now and to analyze that in the future this program has made an improvement in that? One of the concerns is, besides the fact that this takes a lot of time of the people who are managing the properties, you're also taking hundreds of thousands of dollars in the end out of the pockets of the people who have invested in properties in this community. That money could go into the taking care of those properties and improving them. And with that money going out of those pockets, there is less resources available to take care of those properties. So if this program is improving the situation, I'm all for it. I'm happy to pay the fee. It's all good for everybody. But I want to know that, and I would like to see that there's some way to assess that this program is being a benefit to the town, and a method of ending this program if it's not, because it is taking resources. One of the things that I see as I read through this, which concerns me, is in this you talk about examples of the violations, major and minor, and you talk about things like smoke alarms that have been damaged or removed, egresses that have been blocked, hoarding and excessive storage, switch covers that are missing, illegal use of extension cords, missing fire extinguishers. Generally, these are not things that a landlord does. These are all things that a resident does. So this program has a pretty strong stick of being able to fine property owners and take away their ability to rent those properties. I see nothing in here that gives any consequence to the people who might cause these issues. And if you're not addressing the people who are causing the issues, you can find the landlords all you want. You're not going to make it better. So how can you give a program where there is recourse against who is causing these problems? You know, you're gonna say, oh, the fire extinguisher's gone, fine the landlord. That's not going to stop that fire extinguisher from going away next time. So how can you help the landlord make this better? What I was really hoping, as I was hearing about this legislation, or this proposal being passed, is that there was going to be something that was going to help the landlords when you have somebody there who's degrading the neighborhood, making it unsafe for everyone else in the building, disturbing the other tenants. Can you give us something to get that guy out of there? Can you help us protect all the people who are doing the right thing and the landlords who are trying to do the right thing? Or are you just going to punish the landlord who got stuck with a bad tenant? How can you help us with that?
Okay.
So, and that's
Are those your 2 questions? I don't want to interrupt you. I was going to say something between the 1 and 2 questions. No, it's fine. I'm taking notes. You're good.
So that's one, and one last thing is the registration form.
Yep.
I handle a lot of units, and the idea of having to fill out registration forms for these every year, it's just a lot of bureaucracy, and that's not even part of the fee, but it takes time of mine and my staff. I would like to point an example of the Secretary of State and the form where we do the annual reports for our corporations as a brilliantly done one, which is once we have filled that out for my annual report next year, I pull it up, they show all the information and they say, is this accurate? And if it is, I click yes, it's done. That's a reasonable way to do it, but if we're going to have to fill in the information every year, you're making it much harder for us. Please help us so that it is easy to participate.
Great. Yeah. Do you feel like you need a refresher on the 3 questions?
I don't. I'd actually
Thank
like to
you.
answer the last one first, which is what you just described is exactly what we planned. So
Excellent.
When it's been filled out once, if there's no change, the way you submit it the second year is just to check the box that says no changes.
All right, I'm going to push you a little bit further. Can we do that by building so that all of the information in this building is correct and so you hit it once, or do we have to do every apartment?
It's not currently set up to do that. That's something we'll give some consideration to between now and second reading to see
That makes
whether or
sense.
not that might be accommodated.
Yep.
Thank you, that would be helpful.
Sure.
Any response to other questions?
Yeah, the one about sometimes these problems that you describe might be caused by a tenant and that the landlord would be burdened with the responsibility to correct them. I want to make clear actually, so it's my choice of words to say the landlord would be burdened to correct them. That simply is the nature of the relationship, right? So there's protections in the law for landlords who believe that there's someone who's damaging their property and that this is
Let's just.
this is not intended to address that other than by our being out more frequently. One of the things that has been discussed with landlords, some who are supporting this initiative and some who have opposed it, is that by the fact that we're going to actually be inspecting these units more frequently, if there is damage that's done to a unit in between our inspections, it'll be much more apparent the time frame within which that action has happened compared to now when it's any time over the course of a decade that something might have happened. So there are situations, and Assistant Chief Howard could speak to this in greater detail if the board wishes to hear it. There are situations where we've been called out by landlords to do inspections at their properties because of situations where they told us there had been corrective action taken that was then undone by tenants. And we're not in a position to judge who did what, but we are in a position to say, well, on a certain date it looked like this, and on another date it looked like that. It's then up to the civil action between the private parties to work out the result. But the other part of what you said is you were concerned that there's going to be fines that are going to be imposed upon landlords for these matters of violations. The law is really clear, and our intent is really clear in what's stated in the ordinance and how we implement both our own authority and under the state codes that we enforce, that the goal here is compliance. The goal is to have safe housing. So it's not, there will be very rare occasions when there's a fine, and those will be very extreme situations where landlords have been given verbal notice, they've been given a verbal reminder, they've been given written notice, they've been given a warning that they're about to be fined, and through all of that over weeks and weeks, there's no compliance. Then in those situations, we might issue a citation and there'll actually be a fine. But probably I'm gonna throw a number out that's not a calculated number, but from the hip number, but Lenny, correct me if I'm wrong, in excess of 95%, maybe in excess of 99% of the violations that we find out in the community get corrected with no no financial penalty to the landlord. It's just a matter of making that correction and keeping the housing safe.
The problem with the way you structure that, and I work with Lenny often, and he's been a great partner in helping keep our properties in compliance and safe. And I think most of the times we've worked with him, we've called him out because we want his professional opinion and assistance to get it right. My concern is you say, you know, what your goal for the town is compliance. Well, as a property owner, we're the easiest target to go after. So, you know, I'm not going anywhere. The tenant, you know, they can do whatever they want. They can leave. I have asked people from the from state inspection services, Brian Johnson specifically, to enforce the code that says that if fire alarms are taken down out of a building, that there's a fine of up to $1,000 for who does it. We have very detailed photographs and sign-in procedures for all the tenants who come in, and we're able to document, yep, that was there when they got the property, and now it's not. It seems to be in their bottom drawer. Please find this tenant, make them pay attention. But, you know, what I get told is, no, it's your smoke alarm. You got to put it back up. That's your responsibility to make the property safe. Is this going to just put more of that pressure on us? Now we're going to have that happen even more? And to some extent, yes, if the smoke alarm is down, it should be up. And if we go into a place and find one down, we'll put it back up. But it feels like the hammer comes down on us. And if there was something to help us, to give us assistance, to make the people who are doing these things, I mean, we're not hoarding in their apartments. We don't bring bed bugs into their apartments, but we're responsible to deal with that. And there's no recourse for us to go back to them. You can say, yeah, they're responsible. Well, okay. You know, they're going to move off into the sunset. We're going to never see them again. And we've got to deal with these expensive problems. And I'm hoping that this type of regulation will help us to be even better and to make things safer.
There was one other question that you asked, and I want to make sure all three get some kind of acknowledgement, and that was, is there a metrics to kind of in place to make sure that we can see if there's a marked improvement? And I actually think that's an interesting question, and I wondered about that myself.
I have a response to that, just straight up. If we successfully go from an average of 10 years to an average of 4 years, that in itself is an outstanding measurement of success. How could you argue with that?
Only if you are making the building safer. You could inspect them daily, and is that going to make it safer? No, it just takes a lot more time and costs a lot more money.
How would
That's not an improvement. So what I'm saying is, okay, you inspect them twice as often. How do you know that's making it better? That's all I'm asking.
How do we know that more regular inspections don't make it safer?
Right. What's the point of diminishing returns on that? If we inspect it weekly, will that be safer than monthly? Will that be safer than biannually?
I think what we're proposing is a very modest increase of safety in this regard.
What I'm proposing is, how do you measure it? And how do you know? I'm saying if you can measure it, if there's anything that says there are fewer violations, or this system works, okay, has this new twice as often inspection system improved it? Are there fewer violations? Are there fewer injuries? And how many people are getting hurt? That's got to be a pretty easy thing to detect. I mean, between what the current inspections are turning up, what kind of complaints, you ought to know how many people are getting hurt because of violations of housing code one way or another. Okay, does it get better? Do those go down, or is it the same? If it's the same, no, you're not.
It's certainly an interesting question, but it certainly can't be accomplished without trying it, correct?
I suppose. But if you're taking hundreds of thousands of dollars out of the population that's taking care of these buildings, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars that could be used to make those buildings safer. Maybe it goes down.
Well, we're talking about $1.56 at a pop, so
Peter, did you
hundreds of thousands of dollars is a little bit of an exaggeration. Is that what you'll be paying for this program?
No, but I'm paying thousands of dollars.
Okay.
That's money I won't have to put into my buildings.
I understand that. It just feels like a cost of doing business to me. As I said, I'm a landlord, and I'm in support of this. But.
Well, and I said that I'm in support of this program. if it's doing something. I can't support bureaucracy for the sake of bureaucracy because somebody thinks it might. I'm only asking you to document that it really does help. And if there's a way to make this program more effective, I am in full support of it. That's my goal.
Man. Sure. I don't know that we'll satisfy your standard of what demonstrates success. I can tell you that it's not bureaucracy for the sake of bureaucracy, that we have some substandard dwellings, a substantial number of substandard dwellings in our community. More than half of the people in our community rent the home that they live in. This is an important issue for us, and we won't probably satisfy the way you've described what you're looking for as data that shows, for instance, that there's fewer violations, because what we fear right now and what we have seen as evidence in the ongoing, this is not a new program, it's just a more intense program on the same nature of what we've had over the years. And what we know to be true in some locations, I'm not suggesting any particular landlord here, but we know that it's not just a few locations, that it's when we're going out to make an inspection and we make contact and say, we're coming out to make an inspection, that things get addressed. And we get a lot of indication in the in-between times that there's issues that are being neglected. The point of the more frequent inspections is, in fact, that by the very doing of a quadrennial inspection instead of a one every decade inspection, there will be more incentive for landlords who may not be as diligent as other landlords to keep their properties in better condition. You're asking us to prove the negative by demonstrating that dwelling would have been in worse shape if we weren't there every 4 years. We'll never be able to prove that to you. But we believe that it's far more than bureaucracy to have an inspection program that actually is meaningful, and the frequency with which we show up to actually take a look at the unit, make sure that it's meeting the codes and is safe and healthy for people to live in.
For the cost of this program, would it be more cost effective to bring in another inspector? And my guess is that Lenny could tell you exactly which properties those are that are the problem properties and inspect those on a far more regular basis, because you know those are where the problems are. And the ones that you know are in pretty good shape, maybe they only need once every 10 years, but focus on the challenged properties. That might be a more effective way of addressing this problem and increasing the safety and quality of
when we're called out on a complaint basis and we find violations, we are back at those places. And in fact, the worst offenders, we're back regularly to check up because there's regularly new violations. Those are already being addressed by the current system. That's not what we're talking about in terms of raising the standards of the community. To identify, other than in that sort of specified follow-up on prior violations that's proper under the law, for us to just pick and choose who we think are problem landlords versus who we think are more responsible landlords is not the way to run a fair community-wide system that's intending to raise the standard of the community. One last thing I'd say is in terms of the cost of the program, the actual number is $56,000 for the annual cost for that quarter of the units that are being inspected in any 1 year. We on the staff and then the field team that's going to be doing this work, that's most familiar with the conditions out in these rental units, we think that is an appropriate price for the community to pay in raising these standards. We've proposed it to the board, who has looked at this now. I think this will be the fourth time. It was discussed at town meeting. We welcome feedback that you have that might help us further tweak this and strengthen it. But we think that moving forward to raise these standards and make sure that the housing is safer and healthier going forward is important.
Okay, thank you. I hope you can also aim some assistance towards the landlords who are trying to deal with challenged tenancies. And I think that this program, you have an opportunity to address those, and I see nothing of that here. So,
Thank you, Jason.
thank you.
Are there other members of the community that would like to come forward and speak? Will? come forward, please, and state your full name for the TV viewing audience at the microphone.
Good evening. My name is Will Wonas. I'm a property owner in Brattleboro. I don't live in Brattleboro, but my property on Elliott Street is a rental unit. And I'd like to begin by asking how many on the board have tenants who are subsidized housing?
Can I ask you a favor? Because the air conditioner kicked on. Can you speak up just a tiny? I know I have the same tickle. I get you.
How many landlords, well, perhaps in the room, have properties for which there's voucher-supported housing?
I don't currently, but we have a couple behind you.
You may know or you may not know that that kind of housing is not provided at market value. It's usually below market value, sometimes substantially below market value. And these costs cannot be passed on to the Vermont State Housing Authority or Section 8 if there are increased costs, such as the $75 fee for inspections. Now that $1.56 per unit that you're talking about over a year is not paid that way by somebody who has subsidized housing. It's paid, I assume, up front. For my 3 units in subsidized housing, that's 1/3 of 1 month's rent for one of those apartments. That's a fairly sizable chunk and expense. I would like to suggest that for subsidized housing for which these costs cannot be passed on to the renters, that either the fees be waived, prorated, or in some other way made less of a burden to the property owners.
Did you want to have that question answered right off the bat, or did you have other questions you want to add?
No.
Okay.
If you
Thank you.
could answer that, I would appreciate it.
Thanks, Will. Peter, who's the appropriate person to answer the question on whether or not fees can be waived or prorated for landlords who tend to house people who are on Vermont State Housing Authority vouchers?
So that's a policy question. It's not a given. The only exception currently made in the proposed ordinance is for the Brattleboro Housing Authority, because those units are inspected according to HUD standards every year, and the fire department accompanies them on those inspections. So that's already exceeding the standards that are established by this ordinance. But for every other property, we felt it was important to treat all of the different units equally, all the different owners equally. So there's no provision currently made in the ordinance to differentiate among who should pay what fee.
Okay. Liz or Tim, do you have anything you want to bring to the table on Will's question?
Not really. I mean, I guess you knew that I do.
I know
So,
everything.
how many units do you have that are Section 8?
They aren't, excuse me, they aren't technically Section 8,
Yeah,
but they are
Oh, sorry.
Just call them vouchers.
Voucher
Those are all
units?
different.
the Vermont State Housing Authority. 2/3 of my units are.
Okay. Would you say that your,
And excuse me, they do have to meet HUD standards. They do have to meet, I'm not sure exactly how it corresponds for my units and Brattleboro Housing Authority units to meet those standards. But I have inspections, and I have to meet those inspections.
Do you have annual inspections like the housing?
Pardon me?
Do you have annual inspections like the Brattleboro Housing Authority does?
No, I don't, but if I have high turnover, I have an inspection every time there's a turnover.
I think the direction I was going with that question is, and I don't want to get into the weeds as far as like ratios of profit, et cetera, but it's my understanding that you can still be a landlord and make a profit from renting out apartments that have vouchers. Is that correct?
A very slim margin, because as I pointed out, it's the rental figures for those apartments is typically below the market value of the apartments, especially on streets such as Elliott Street or Frost Street.
Okay. Well, it's something to think about, but I still view this as a cost of doing business. I'm not sure how $1.56 can't be absorbed.
If it were billed to me at $1.56 a month, I'd be happy.
Well, it's only, and just to
I
make
mean,
that
that's what you're
clear,
stating.
The $75 gets billed once every 4 years in the year in which the inspection will take place.
That's correct.
So it won't be a situation where you won't know it's coming.
And so will the inspections for each of my apartments be staggered, or are they all going to happen at once?
By street currently.
Right, it's set up to be done by street, so if all of your apartments are on one street, then it
They're
would be
in one
once
bit.
every 4 years that all of them would be inspected. It would suggest that also means that you've got 3 years off when you won't be paying any fees if all of your units are in a single street. So
Yeah.
we would hope that you can make provisions for that.
I would hope so too, because it's my profit margins are such that that $75 is a major portion of an $800 rental that could be sold at over $900.
Okay.
I'd like to make one other point, and it's
Sure.
one that Jason Cooper brought up, and that is assistance in getting problem tenants out as a result of inspections. As Lenny Howard can attest, I've called him a couple of times about a person who has an unsafe living condition, and she, well, I shouldn't even identify her as male or female, but this person has multiple admissions to Brattleboro Memorial Hospital, multiple admissions to the retreat, and the only way I can get her out, aside from having her apartment, her living conditions condemned, which I have done, is to evict her and put her on the street. There's no provision other than that. And she is now facing an eviction which will put her on the street. She's a 71-year-old person who is unable to take care of herself. And the town and the state have not seen, I have not seen any real assistance from them in getting her into a managed care situation.
I can respond.
This is an unsafe living condition for her and for my building. And the only way for me to solve this is to evict her and put her on the street. And that will happen within a month.
So that is an extreme failure of the system, and it's something that frustrates me pretty deeply. The process of getting somebody put into a managed care situation against their will is astoundingly challenging, which sounds great for for citizens' rights. You don't want to be put somewhere against your will, but it is heartbreaking and challenging and frustrating when you're watching somebody in the community who just can't, and no matter how hard you try, and I have experienced this personally recently with somebody who very much I wish could be taken care of in a managed care without them necessarily consenting. I wish I had a good answer for you. We won't have any authority. State legislation barely has any authority. Medical experts barely have any authority, and it is an extremely broken and frustrating place to be in. Yeah, I wish I had a good answer, but my good answer is it's so broken. I wish somebody would fix it because we could use it in a few situations.
I appreciate your understanding.
Yeah, honestly, yeah.
It must be hard on you.
It's
I've
frustrating
had two
on
of
him.
these situations recently, and during the eviction process for one of them, I went for 3 months without any rent from her.
Yep.
So, and that's That's a real-life situation for a landlord who has that kind of a problem tenant. And that expense of losing 3 months of rent against my profitability and my ability to pay $75 for an inspection for that person's apartment, I'm in the red on that apartment. Thanks for your listening and
You're welcome,
understanding.
Will. Thank you. Are there other members tonight from the community that would like to come forward and speak about this rental inspection program? Frick? Even though you've already gotten up, I'd ask you to introduce yourself in case people have newly tuned in to tonight's live streamed meeting.
Frick Sprite, District 3.
Thank you.
Owner and manager of a number of units in the same neighborhood. I've been dealing with first the town building department, and then when the fire department took over, inspecting buildings for about 40 years now. I have, during some of that time, been ahead of code in terms of the condition of my buildings. And I feel like the people who've been in charge of that have been helpful, reasonable, flexible, have done a very good job of training us to do our jobs better and to meet their expectations so that they don't need to come very often if we're paying attention. I think one of the things that's not properly appreciated and goes under the radar is what a resource the local landlords are in terms of helping people stay in their housing when things get challenging. I describe my job as part social worker and part financial advisor, marriage counselor. I understand that my tenants' welfare and my welfare are intrinsically linked. And every time I have experiences where I feel like the system treats me differently from my tenants, makes presumptions of it's almost like treating tenants as children, which I think is frankly disrespectful. The situations like Jason and Will brought up are not uncommon. And I have never seen a tenant held responsible for anything that they've done. And it's, I mean, it gives tenants the idea that they don't have to be responsible in terms of taking care of their places, in terms of paying their rent, in terms of being respectful of their neighbors, and any number of other things. I try and be careful about who I let in the first place, so I minimize that sort of thing, but it's inevitable. And when we have things like this where the certain landlords are getting hit, obviously not all of them, because you said that HUD doesn't, and there is a situation where the Housing Authority is using more of our resources, taking them around every year, and not paying for it. That doesn't make sense. There are people who are subsidized the same way the people that Will was talking about are, and I have quite a number of them myself. It is actually true that Tyler or David come around once a year and inspect those units. Those units should not need to be inspected again. That's duplicative.
Do we want to mention who Tyler and David are for people who might not know?
Okay, They,
Just you and I know, we know.
Brattleboro Housing Authority and Vermont State Housing Authority,
Great.
which are the two organizations that administer virtually all of the voucher programs that we deal with as
Thank you
landlords.
for doing that.
Whether they're federal or state funded or whatever. Well, they get inspected on lease as well, but they get inspected every year, which is great because they actually hold the tenants responsible, which I appreciate. They're actually very good at that, so you know, there's an example that it is doable. It's basically, it feels like death by 1,000 fees and bureaucratic, you know, demands. I'm frankly exhausted. Emotionally, physically, financially, I've just about had it. And you know, there are others of us who are also ready to just bag it because you know, people who really care about their tenants and their welfare, who are don't feel supported by the system. And then on top of that, there are things that are you know, add insult to injury, like subsidizing our competitors and having, you know, if we have larger buildings, we don't get trash pickup, which now with pay-as-you-throw doesn't even make sense. I mean, it didn't make sense to begin with. I talked to Peter about it at the Triple T, and he said it wouldn't cost any more to pick up everybody's trash. And now, with the tipping fees being paid by the bag, you know, we could pick up the businesses downtown, we could pick up everybody, as long as it was in a bag. So now what I have is a couple of dumpsters at my bigger buildings, and I have people from elsewhere dumping trash in my dumpsters because they don't want to pay for the bags.
Sorry.
So it's just yet another thing that has made our lives more difficult, more expensive, and more frustrating. And I hope if this goes through, which it seems like it's a train that's got a lot of steam behind it, that at least you can do something about the HUD or the voucher units and exempt them because they're already being inspected, and do something about the trash thing. That's ancillary, but it's something you guys could do, and it's not going to cost you anything. It's not going to change the bottom line on the taxes. It would just make life simpler. So,
Thank you, Frank.
Well, I do
no,
have
one more. I'm sorry.
I
Go for
did
it.
really want to know, and I haven't gotten a solid number on this.
Okay.
How many of the units are actually seriously problematic? And how many of us are there that mostly know what we're doing?
If anybody is going to answer that, I would ask to make sure that the person answering it is at a microphone.
Okay. Well,
It's Len or Peter.
It's a very subjective.
approximately?
Yeah.
I'm gonna guess probably 40% of them.
40%.
So Len Howard right now is answering frickin' saying that if he had to make a guesstimate, he could guess about 40%.
Wow.
Is that a correct statement, Len? Just want to make sure I'm transcribing that correctly. Okay.
And let me just add that during the inspection that I told everybody about earlier, I had several violations. They were minor violations.
Yeah.
And I was glad to know of them. I hadn't thought of the fire extinguisher in the kitchens, both kitchens of this unit, hadn't been recharged in a while, and they needed either a new unit or it needed to be recharged. And a couple of old CO2 detectors that needed to be updated.
Yeah.
So right there was an instance where you can be your own judge, but I consider myself a fairly conscientious landlord, and yet I would not have caught this myself, being a busy person, without this inspection. So I think the question is fairly irrelevant, to be honest.
It is relevant, but that is a higher number than I expected. The other thing I'm concerned about is that I've had to deal from time to time with what I would call retaliatory calls for inspections, where the building has recently been inspected, and was holding a tenant accountable for, you know, payment or behavior or something, and their response was to call any. And
Thank you, Frick. Hugh, if you could come forward and introduce yourself to the viewing audience, please, with the microphone.
My name's Hugh Barber. I'd like to start with 27 years of experience with Barrett, Bacassi, and Howard and their predecessors, and they were fantastic. They've helped me upgrade my building. They've helped me with problem tenants. We're up to code. I can't speak enough about them. I guess why I'm here is what's so broken that we need to re-energize the whole program. And I understand you want to upgrade the quality of housing in our community, but I wonder if you could concentrate somehow on the problem properties. You guys know who they are. And you know, in my perspective, we've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars upgrading our facility to get it up to code. And why should I be treated like the guy who doesn't spend a dime and doesn't care about what his tenants or what kind of living situation they have? So that's the problem I'm having with it. I can see from your global perspective, or you want to upgrade the quality of housing everywhere, and the good guys, like me, in my own opinion, get treated like the bad guys. So I guess I have a problem with that.
Okay.
I don't know if you can concentrate on the bad properties without bringing all the properties up to snuff. And in the fee, $1.56 a month, I'm going to get a charge, an invoice from the town of Brattleboro for $1,950, due and payable in 30 days. That's not a $1.56 a month. You know, you can explain it any way you want. And the other thing is, my building is located in the downtown district, and we already pay taxes on the downtown district tax for the organization which we get questionable results from. You know, we don't talk about quantifying their results. I don't know how to quantify it. I mean, they do nice flowers and everything. Does that bring business to the community? I don't know. But I had to come and say my piece tonight because I take great pride in what I do, and I take pride in the relationship I have with these guys, because they've done a hell of a job. And I just wonder if you can walk before you run with this whole thing. And maybe you can't. Maybe it's so important to the community that you have to do it. But that's my 2 cents. And if anybody wants to ask me a question, I'll give you an answer, and it'll be as good as what you pay for it.
Well, I'm glad to see you. I haven't seen you in a long time, and I appreciate the words that you said tonight, and I know you mean them all. And we're going to be taking all of these things into consideration. This is the first reading, and we'll have a second reading, and we'll have opportunity to take a look at things in between the two readings.
Okay.
Because you came all this way, can I ask a question?
Of course you can.
Because he offered. Hugh, I'm just curious, why does this proposed program make you feel like...
Can you speak up just a little bit?
Sorry. Why does it make you feel like you're being treated like a bad guy, as in your words?
Well,
this is market research. I'm trying to really get to the heart of some of the emotions.
I guess due process, you know. We've got upgraded. We're up to code with our elevator, with our wiring, with the sprinklers. Why do we get treated in the same boat, in the same manner as some entity that hasn't done that? I guess that's what kind of bothers me.
I hear that frustration.
And it's $2,000 every 4 years, which admittedly, you know, it's not going to break the bank, but ultimately, who might pay that fee? The tenants, because we're going to raise the rents, and at some point, you know, they're already challenged paying the rents, and we try to keep our rents in the middle of the road to retain our tenants without a lot of turnover, but ultimately, the landlords aren't gonna swallow all that. And as Jason said, it may be less money to put in capital improvements back into the property.
It's always a choice made by each individual landlord.
Well, thank you for those words. That does help explain that.
Thank you
that
all.
statement. Thank you.
And
Thank you, Hugh.
I do understand the global desire to improve the quality of the tenant base. I mean, of the real estate.
I feel that. I feel that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Hugh. Are there other members of the community that would like to speak? Come on, Sue. Jackie, come forward and introduce yourself, please, to the community.
I'm Jackie Reese. I own and manage a couple of buildings in town. And I guess I just want to put forth, I don't know how many of the landlords have actually experienced having their property adversely affected by neighboring properties. So I just kind of want to put it out there, that kind of information. I believe that this more frequent inspection is going to subject your tenants to more frequent inspections, which I think is a good thing. If you have,
excuse me.
I know if I ever have somebody coming and inspecting my house, my apartment, I clean.
Right. Like a mad person.
Yeah, it's like you invite people over every once in a while just to make sure you clean your house really well. So I think that benefit to all of the houses, I mean, in Brattleboro is going to have this network kind of an effect. And I know that there are some of the tenants that are in the buildings that I'm in, that I manage, are reluctant to let me inside. If I get inside their door, they're happier than letting me all the way throughout. And I think that's because everybody is afraid that something wrong is going to be found. And in many of these apartments, it's going to be something minor. But in the case of the building that was across the street from my house, the effects of uninspected apartments and uninspected building was major. It brought down the whole neighborhood. It almost brought down my house. It spreads out that way, and there are only 4 houses on my street, so that's a quarter of the houses that were housing and enabling a very major drug operation. So I'm willing to put up with it. I am willing to put up with if I have to raise my rent by $5 a month to each of my buildings. That's not going to be a major burden on my tenants, and I'm going to make a profit out of that. I'll make a $3.50 profit a month on that. So I don't think that this $1.57 a month is really worth foregoing the opportunity to have the police and fire department and landlords in a more regular relationship.
Thank you for that different perspective regarding other property values, which we haven't heard tonight. Are there other members of the community that would like to speak on the rental housing inspection program, first reading of the ordinance that's taking place right now? Hearing none, I'm going to close the public hearing portion of this. Okay.
Second reading and final public hearing will be held 3 weeks from tonight on July 9th.
And on this meeting this evening, it was to collect feedback. There's no action required on this item, which is different than what will likely happen on July 9th. Okay, at this time, we are going to go ahead and move along to recommendation for appointment of additional deputy health officers, which is a dovetailing topic.
So there are several members of the fire department who currently do assist in the inspections program, who, in order to be able to fully implement what's recommended, will need to be made deputy health officers so that they can write the same kinds of reports that lead to the correction of health code violations as opposed to just fire code violations. So those are Charles Keir, Rusty Sage, Chris Fellows, Matt Casabona, and Alex Morin. And the way that this works with the state is we don't actually appoint health officers and deputy health officers. We make a recommendation to the state, and the state health department actually makes the appointment. So staff's recommendation to the board this evening is that the board approve forwarding Charles Keir, Rusty Sage, Chris Fellows, Matt Casabona, and Alex Morin as people who are recommended to be appointed by the state as deputy health officers for the town of Brattleboro.
Great, thank you, Peter. Are there board questions or comments about the proposed appointments?
Just a question, just if this action were not taken at our next meeting, what happens with these recommendations?
So we'd urge you to go ahead and take this action that's recommended, because even if you decided not to move ahead with the ordinance, there'd be no harm in having more people on the team who can go out and deal with the problem properties as they arise.
Great, thank you.
Okay, members of the community want to speak on these proposed appointments to the health officer positions? Deputy Frick. Technically, you should remind the world who you are.
I am me.
Great.
Fricksbright District 3.
Great.
I did not even realize that they could only do fire and not health-related ones. So, of course, go for it. I did want to straighten out a little possible misconception, which is that this ordinance has nothing to do with the police, has nothing to do with dealing with drug activity. It will not be helpful with anything like that, unfortunately. And I am curious what stands in the way of the police department being more proactive when it comes to obvious drug activity, because I have seen it going on and know who the neighborhood drug dealers are, and they seem to be free to do business. So I'm curious whether we need legislative change at the state level or what.
We're off topic.
No, but I mean,
Well, I was just gonna say, we can't technically discuss that because it's not on the agenda. I just wanted to toss that out there. Okay.
Future consideration.
Heard. Anybody else want to speak about the appointment of additional health officers, deputy health officers? Okay, great. I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Thanks, Liz.
I recommend that we make a motion to recommend to the State Department of Health the appointment of Charles Keir III, Rusty Sage, Chris Fellows, Matt Casabona, and Alex Morin as deputy health officers.
Great. Liz has made a motion regarding the appointment of additional deputy health officers and has listed off the names of the proposed individuals. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Peter, would you like to give us an update on the next topic, which is the Groundworks Housing Resource Center project?
Sure. So the recommendation that was going to be presented to the board this evening is staff recommending the appropriation of $100,000 for the project, based on the fact that the grant for which the town applied, the Groundworks is will be a sub-recipient of, through the Vermont Community Development Program, was for $500,000. It has been funded. The project was approved, but based on all the competing needs around the state, it was funded at the amount of $400,000. The project is getting nearer and nearer to being able to move forward, and it's critical that we plug the gap for the fundraising that's needed in order to actually be able to move forward and commence the project. So it was going to be before you this evening, but since there are two members who were not able to be here, and since
I shouldn't
chair-
vote on it,
the-
basically.
The chair is an employee of Groundworks and has a conflict of interest to vote on this matter. What we'll do is present this item instead on July 9th when you have more board members present, and hopefully it could be approved at that time to move forward with the project. So we'll coordinate with Groundworks, we'll coordinate with the members of the board, make sure that we're going to have a quorum of members who actually can vote on the matter at the next meeting, and one of the next couple of meetings we'll make sure that this matter is represented.
If he wants to, we just can't vote.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you for that update. If people would like to speak on this topic tonight, that is fine, but we would not be able to take a formal action on the item. Having said that, is there anybody who would like to make comment or question? Josh, Davis?
I feel compelled to speak on this topic. Again, Josh Davis from Brattleboro, also Executive Director of Groundworks Collaborative. Really very appreciative to be able to come back to the board, give an update on the project. The project is going well, it's moving forward. I'll be a little cagey tonight, so I'm going to be coming back very soon to have this discussion. And so happy to bring this back to you. And this is critical funds that we need to help close the gap and keep this project moving forward, as Peter said. So I really appreciate you taking it up tonight and getting it back on the agenda as soon as you can so that we can keep this moving. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Josh.
Further questions, comments from board members or community members on this item that we cannot vote on this evening regarding Groundworks Collaborative? Okay.
I'll save my comments.
Save it.
Yeah.
Save it for next time. All right, so we will look forward to having a quorum hopefully in July and getting this right back on the agenda. Okay. At this time, we will move forward to the modification of a tax stabilization agreement, and this is regarding the Brooks House.
Yes, so the Brooks House Tax Stabilization Agreement is, currently in the 5th year of 8 years in that agreement. The original agreement provided specified values that increased at certain intervals during that 8-year period. And then the value that was specified in the agreement was actually discounted for the taxable value on which taxes have been paid to the town. The full value taxes are owed to the state and paid by the owners for the education property tax, but for the town's property tax purposes, the tax stabilization agreement reduced, basically discounted the amount of tax that was owed. The agreement also provided that in year 4 and in year 7 of the 8-year agreement, the value could be revisited. And last year, in fact, the town reviewed the value, had an appraisal done on the property, came back with a value through the assessor's office process of establishing the grand list. Every property owner has the opportunity to appeal if they feel that the assessor's determination is too high. The owners of the Brooks House did appeal. There was a hearing held by the Board of Listers that established the value of the property at $7.1 million. Through a further hearing at the Board of Civil Authority, that value was upheld. So the Listers decision at $7.1 million was the value of the property last year. But as I described, the $7.1 million property value, market value established through that process and through, inserted into the agreement is then discounted for the purposes of the taxes that are actually imposed on the property. So the town was actually receiving taxes on the property as if it was at a value in the mid-5s, approximately $5.5 million. As we got into the final setting of the values for this current tax year, the owners of the Brooks House indicated that they still had concerns about the value of the property being set at $7.1 million. They actually had represented during the hearings last year, during the appeal process, that they thought the value of the property was $6 million. When they came back and they discussed with us the concern that they had about the property being overvalued, the town indicated that the next time that the value could be adjusted in accordance with the terms of the original agreement would be in year 7, and that for this year and next year it would be as established through last year's appeal process. At that point, the owners of the property actually proposed that perhaps we should just not have the stabilization agreement anymore, that they would sort of waive tax stabilization if the town was willing to establish the value of the property at $6 million and just not have stabilization any longer. We don't believe that's an appropriate way for the town to set property values outside of a tax stabilization agreement because of the state law that governs how assessors do the work that they do to make sure that everybody's property has a fair value established. We did do additional review though, and there are additional sales that have occurred since last year that are applicable to this property and for comparison purposes. And importantly, we had another year, and the first year in which the property had been almost completely leased. We had better data for the actual costs and revenues related to the operation of the Brooks House. And the sum of that, the total impact of this additional information and the evaluation that was done in the assessor's office is that they believe that the current value could reasonably be set at somewhere between $6.2 and $6.6 million. And the variation there depends on different methodologies for calculating the value and sort of margins of error where two different assessors might reasonably disagree. But they firmly believe the actual value of the building to be between $6.2 and $6.6 million. At that point, in further communication with the owners, we agreed that it would be in the town's best interest and in the owner's best interest to modify the tax stabilization agreement so that the actual value of the property would be identified, but there would be no discount any longer. So it still is a tax stabilization agreement. It is stabilizing the value of the property at $6.2 million within that range that was identified as being the actual value of the property. And by stabilizing it at that number for the remaining years of the agreement and not any longer discounting from that value for the purposes of taxation, the amount of property taxes that the town will receive will actually increase by about $32,000 a year, even though the value set in the agreement will be $6.2 million instead of $7.1 million. So we believe that, in fact, the owners have made a fair point that the $7.1 million value is too high. And we believe that the meeting of the minds around having the $6.2 million value in the agreement and no discounting for purposes of taxes, and therefore $32,000 of additional revenue for the town's general fund, is in fact a win-win outcome for the parties. So we recommend your approval of the modified agreement that's before you this evening.
Great, thank you, Peter. Do members of the board have questions or comments on this topic of the tax stabilization agreement between the town of Brattleboro and Vermilion Inc., which we know better as the Brooks House people?
Well, after consideration, I also believe that this is in the best interest for the town of Brattleboro.
I would agree with that. After consideration, I gave it much consideration. Tim?
I might have a question for the proprietors of the Brooks House, but I don't think anyone is here, correct?
That's correct.
And it was more of a curiosity question, but this, since it'll result in over $100,000 more tax revenue for the taxpayers of the town of Brattleboro, I would support it.
That certainly was the deciding factor after
Is it that
contemplation.
Over the
Over
remaining
4
life
years.
of the agreement.
Oh.
128 maybe. We're looking.
Members of the community who are present this evening have any questions about this topic, about the tax stabilization agreement between, right? I'll leave up to you if you want to introduce yourself again. I
Well,
feel like
actually,
It's established.
you say your name so quickly that even though you said it 4
Frick.
times, I couldn't understand.
You have to kind of see it written.
So,
I was just wondering how big I have to be able
still
to
didn't get
negotiate my taxes like this.
bigger.
For the moment there, it sounded like the discount they were getting was equal to all the taxes.
I mean, I was
that
going to
pay
say
on all
something
my
like
buildings, so.
more flowery, but the truth is just bigger. Yep. Thank you, Frick.
Have a good evening.
Yeah, you too. Thanks for coming tonight and hanging out till 8 o'clock.
Come Thursday, please. And that goes for everybody watching.
Firehouse, 6 to 8.
at the
Downtown.
Central Fire Station, if you can.
That wasn't the, that wasn't
Well,
encouraging face.
that's when we'll be talking about the very topics you brought up earlier.
Okay.
Okay. All right. At this time, I would entertain a motion.
Oh, where am I? I'll make a motion.
F.
I'll make a motion to approve an amended tax stabilization agreement between the town of Brattleboro and Vermilion, Inc. as presented.
Great. Tim has made a motion regarding the amended tax stabilization agreement between the town and Vermilion, Inc. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
I just wanted to say thank you to all of town staff who worked diligently on this.
I second that, thank you. Third. Great. Okay, so we're now moving on to item G, which is Charter Review Commission, consideration of request to appoint, and this is a request that came to us submitted by Spoon Agave. Peter, if you would.
Sure, I see Mr. Agave is here, so
I know, good timing. You must have been watching.
I'd like to address you, and then staff does have a recommendation for how to move forward.
Okay, great.
Spoon Agave, District 3. You have the written request. Have had it for a while.
Correct.
Its history of this began about 2 years ago during a long series of discussions with the town moderator about the how well the representative town meeting worked and democracy in general and in town, et cetera, et cetera. And as we talked about various things, with more and more frequency, things popped up in which he said, oh, there's a change, or I said, there's a change, there's a potential change anyway. What it all comes down to, in short, is the feeling, and it's a certain feeling, that the most important asset we have in being able to function as a community and being able to face difficult times ahead is having a strong democratic town meeting process and a strong charter, which is where that's all laid out. The relevant part of that is that what democracy implies is participation. And among other things, it was our concern, and I know it's your concern as you've looked year in and year out for members to fill all the town offices and committees and boards, etc. And I know it's been our mutual concern about the small numbers of people that come out to elections and the very small numbers of people that have any interest at all in our schools. And this is not unique to Brattleboro. It's national. There's most Americans feel like they have no connection, no impact, no sense of being part of a democracy in which they are participating in any useful way. I think it's a little bit stronger here in Vermont and in Brattleboro because we still work with the town meeting process. But, so we have sort of a leg up. There were several different categories of things that came up there about the charter. There was an increasing number of sort of what you might want to call, it's not a particularly appropriate word, but maybe it's descriptive, sort of housekeeping stuff about how to organize and the Human Services Committee, how that gets appointed, who appoints it, are there terms, lots and lots of things about that. Is it a committee that will be independent of anything, sort of self-running, self-sustaining, or will it have some standing in the town? There was some questions of some clarity needed in how to appoint the finance committee members. There was, and then there's a lot of things coming down the pike. We have the 16-year-old vote. It's not through yet, but that'll probably have to be incorporated. Oh, and then housekeeping duties. There's a school board, which is now no longer a part of the charter, and they had a fair little piece about them. There are some questions, although some probably, I don't want to say, I wouldn't say, probably most of it would simply be stricken from the charter. But then again, on closer examination, there might be some other questions like, does our town's representative to the merged school board still have standing, have the same standing as town meeting members as some school board members had in the past. So there's a lot of small housekeeping questions like that. There will also be since this is a pretty long process, this is the place where things get talked about. I know many and many a time that the board has said to somebody standing here, this is not a question that we can handle at a select board meeting. And very often those are questions for which there are no other place to consider appropriately than a charter revision. It is pretty much strictly an intellectual exercise. It's just thinking. It's understanding. It's learning about democracy, about town government, about Brattleboro history and tradition. The last charter commission had interviewed a whole host of select board members, former select board members, and all sorts of people with a history in town, asking everybody's ideas about what they thought might be changed. And there were a lot of new ideas introduced at that point. And I don't know what would happen this time. But inevitably, you can expect that people would show up with a lot of interests. So there's all that. And then we have, while this will be ongoing, there will also, there may be changes in state law regarding what's the euphemism, Peter, for a home rule?
Self-governance.
Self-governance. And so there may be things, there may be charter changes that could be, that could reflect some of the town's desires if that happens. There's a lot of things happening with more regional affairs, and they're could be potential charter changes there to work that into it. So, but I don't know. It's in the period that I would expect this Charter Revision Commission to be operating, and I can hardly imagine it lasting more than 2 years, although that does not mean that all the proposals have to wait until the end of 2 years, although that's been the tradition that proposals were put forth after the commission was completed.
Okay.
I recall on the last commission there were public hearings, and there was quite a lot. There are some questions also in housekeeping. It seems like housekeeping, but it gets into very, 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 very interesting ideas. How large should the representative town meeting body be? It's always been the exact same amount. And are there reasons that another number may be more effective? So the questions, there was, we had talked and wondered whether a charter could call for a representative town meeting website in which town meeting members could be talking to each other about issues in a public forum that everybody has access to and is archiving the conversations. Because that is happening anyway, but it is happening in 20 different places with different numbers of people in different groups, all involved. And the question has come up is how does this interface with open meeting law? Is open meeting law even applicable here? So these are pretty complex stuff.
Okay.
Anyway, it goes on, and I don't know if I had, I'll just...
No, it doesn't. It's not.
My,
go on and on.
I won't go on and on. Let me see if there's anything important.
Thank you.
That I may have left out. Well, essentially, it's just that in sum, it's the whole purpose is to strengthen our democracy, specifically through strengthening participation.
Great. That's a good way to say it, and thank you for that. At this time, okay.
When you call a break?
Are you sure?
That'd be good, because I have to go.
Okay,
I think,
I'm really sorry. We just had to have a sidebar because I really need to use the bathroom and I'm not allowed to leave, and Liz needs, and I just can't even think anymore. So I just like a quick, like 1.5 minute, 2 minute break. We'll be right back. It just has to happen. That's where we are in life. Okay.
Maybe 3.
Maybe.
And you're
Hi. Okay, and we're back. Sorry for that unplanned, interruption, but these things happen. Okay, so we have heard from Spoon Agave before we took that break on the potential of a request or appointment of a charter review commission. And at this time, I'd like to give that to Peter so that he can, give us staff perspective and staff recommendations.
Sure. So we don't have a recommendation about whether or not you should appoint a commission, but for reasons similar to things that Mr. Agave said in his remarks about the importance of the town charter and the seriousness and intensity and the process of reviewing and updating a town charter, we think that there's a certain orderliness to how you would go about establishing the Charter Review Commission if you do choose to move forward. And so the memorandum dated June 11th that I've provided in your backup for this meeting simply says, you're not compelled at this time to establish a Charter Review Commission. There is a provision in the charter that requires that the charter be reviewed at least once every 15 years. We're currently, depending on whether you look at the beginning of the last process or the end of the last process, we're currently somewhere between 6 and 11 years into a 15-year window. So it's at your discretion whether or not you choose to move forward at this time if you think there's a compelling reason to do that, or whether you wish to wait for a future time.
Okay.
If you do choose to move forward at this time, we've laid out what we believe would be a way in which the town attorney and the town staff could provide some additional assistance to you, and the community could be well advised about your intentions, so that the process of establishing the committee would move forward in a orderly manner.
Okay. All right. Did you want to?
One thing.
Spoon?
Just for specific information, the last one started November of '08.
Okay, thank
so
you.
So you know precisely. If you go forward with this, the normal procedure is to put out lots of notices and give lots of time for people to respond and sort of have adequate, et cetera, et cetera. I would like to recommend that if you go forward and call for applications, that it be accompanied with a question to sort of attract the people that would be particularly interested in this, and to make it a little bit easier for yourselves when you're making a decision about how to choose. A very, very fundamental question like, why is a town charter important?
Okay, thank you. We'll take that under advisement.
Or something like that.
Okay. Are there further questions from the board? Comments, questions?
Yes.
Liz, go ahead.
Well, first of all, I'd like to commend Mr. Agave for his interest in town government and also for liking to think about town government. But I question his supposition that the best way to ignite interest in existing town committees is with another town committee. And I feel that this is not the right time to institute a town charter commission. I feel that the town is quite committed to the select board goals that we talked about at our last meeting and other initiatives that were brought forward from town meeting, and that includes the sustainability officer and our concerns with the opioid crisis in town, and that there are major important elements that are part of both town meeting business and select board business and the existing committees that exist in town that could be strengthened and invigorated without a charter committee. I just don't think the town is right, the time is right, and I think that there are other specific issues and goals that are best attended to at this time. In particular, as I mentioned, the sustainability and the opioid issue.
Thank you for that, Liz. Tim, anything you'd like to say on this topic?
I would sort of generally concur with what Liz just said, although my focus might be on a few points you actually brought up, Spoon. One of which is for instance, the 16-year-old voting has not been decided upon by our legislature. So that's something that is going to be out of our hands, for instance. So it would be something that would have to be, if not lightly addressed initially, if we did kick off this process, it would have to be readdressed somewhere down the road, possibly. We don't know. But I think maybe in the next session we'll know something more. Also, the school stuff is difficult, and still it seems to be an ongoing process. If I read it correctly, I try not to get too involved in the school side because we have so much to do here on the town side. But certainly this commission would want to look at those upcoming issues, which are sort of, in my estimation, still evolving.
In legal process.
Yeah, could be, right? Or are they definitely in legal process? I don't know.
Yeah.
We don't have David here. He's our school expert, I guess.
Lost without him.
And I think generally I just wanted to say that I'm really happy that you brought this up, and thank you for certainly past service to the town. You were sitting up here just a few years ago, right? Or it feels like a few years ago to me. It was quite a few years ago at this point, maybe. But that's the way I'm leaning, although I think maybe we should have our other members chime in. I feel a little too down, so I'm not sure
Yeah.
would we be comfortable in sort of saying yay or nay, or should we just ask our missing board members to chime in as well?
I mean, at this point, I'm not necessarily feeling like it's something that I'm even ready to consider right now with some of the big topics that we have on the table. And so maybe it is more, either that's going to be the outcome tonight, or it's more fair to wait until we have the other two members of the board present in case their opinions differ vastly from ours.
Yeah.
Liz, what do you think?
I think if we are in agreement, it doesn't matter what they think.
Technically, that's true, and also funny.
But if Daniel were here,
Would he sway you? Is that what you're saying?
oh no, I'm just saying,
I mean-
would that be a nice way to go about things?
I mean, I think.
Certainly without letting them chime in. I think the important
We have
thing
a
for
quorum.
me is that this is, I understand we have a quorum, but for me, I think it's important that Spoon brought this up and that
Me too.
the wheels might not start to go into motion, but there's a placeholder now.
Mhm.
And I feel like it's certainly something that if we don't say this is the year, then we have to look at it, making that decision next year or the following year, because we are running out of time, however you decide to figure out what, when the beginning of the 15-year window is. It just feels like it is good timing to bring it up. I don't know if it's perfect timing to kick off the process, which is a long one and important.
It feels to me like it's important to you that Daniel and David be here for this discussion, and then if that's what I'm hearing, then I think that that's what we should do.
Getting a face from this. That's how I feel, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Peter, can you move this to a future agenda?
Reschedule this
Yep,
for the
for
next,
when we have full
the next
board.
time there'll be a full board.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Great, thank you, thank you.
What's the resolution here that you're gonna reopen this at a later board meeting?
We want to have the full board present to discuss this, and so we're going to wait to hear from Daniel and David to make sure they can actually, all five of us can be at the next meeting. And I'm not actually certain at this moment that there will be a full board at the next meeting, so we need to ask them that offline, and then we'll be able to know better. And Peter will stay in contact with you.
Yeah, I'll be in touch with you personally, Spoon, so that you'll know when it's
That
coming.
makes sense, because 4 weeks ago, you declined to hear it for the reason that you did not have a full board.
Yep, and so we're going to do that again. Yep,
Okay.
sorry.
And just make a note that the next board meeting is a little off kilter.
Right.
It's July 9th.
July 9th.
July 9th.
Instead of, we're gonna have one in July and not
Okay.
two. So it's the.
Okay,
All right, thank you.
great, thank you, Spoon. Okay, we're going to move on now to the next item on the agenda, which is a grant application regarding the Western Avenue Bike and Pedestrian Scoping Study, which is pretty exciting.
It is. So the Traffic Safety Committee was approached by members of the community who asked that we consider establishing bike lanes along Western Avenue. We had discussion at 2 separate Traffic Safety Committee meetings. It was generally supported by members of the committee, but with strong advice from staff and the acceptance and acknowledgement of the committee that it is a more complicated matter than just going out and restriping the street in order to make sure that if we do implement bike lanes along that corridor, that it's done in a manner that is safe both for the bicyclists and for for motorists and pedestrians, actually, also using that area. It's important for these things to be engineered solutions as opposed to just painted on the street. And so, for instance, I'll just say as one example, the way that different types of transportation interact at, for instance, driveways or intersections changes pretty substantially when there are bike lanes present. So in sum, I would say that the reaction to this has been very positive, but we've urged that the town move cautiously and methodically on this to get the proper engineering advice. We've met with the state Agency of Transportation around this issue, and they support that entirely. They're excited about the possibility that we might add bike lanes through the corridor, but agree that based on the types of issues that I've described, that this ought to be studied. And they recommended that we apply for this particular grant through this particular program as a way to get the funds necessary to do a scoping study. So we're recommending that you authorize staff to apply for a $40,000 bike ped grant through the Vermont Agency of Transportation.
Thank you, Peter. It's an extremely busy road, and anything that has to do with safety of people who are a little more vulnerable, such as people who are riding bicycles or walking, is good with me. Are there further questions or comments from members of the board on this grant application?
Just that I'm very much in favor of it.
I'd like to just acknowledge two things. One is that it's kind of exciting with this study possibility that we are sort of expanding the study to now go all the way down to downtown.
Yes.
And I think that's an important, good step, because it was a little odd when we were talking about it just being between exit 2 and Spino Court.
Correct.
Because then where do people go?
Yeah, that's weird.
Usually
Yeah.
you're continuing on. So I think it would be a great use of funds, if I don't mind saying so myself, to study the whole way into town, if people are going to work, etc. And then I just also want to acknowledge that, just to make it clear to everybody who's listening and interested in the subject, that I do also hear other side of the issue with concerns from a lot of people on Western Avenue about safety of pedestrians and whether or not we'll be able to work out something that pleases both bicyclists and people who have to, there's a lot of issues. If you take away parking from the side of the street, you're forcing everybody to walk across the street, and they don't normally do that right now, and then there's mobility issues. So that's exactly why it's gonna be methodical and why we need the study.
And if I might just add, your point's really well taken about the extension of this. So the original proposal was just from exit 2 to Spino Court. That's what the initial discussion was at traffic safety. Spino Court is across from the Avenue Grocery. But in fact, it was the communication that we had with the Agency of Transportation that led to the lengthening of this. That was a really good collaborative process with them, where we decided that because the state was willing to fund this effort, and because it would be more valuable if we studied the entire corridor and looked at how the bike lanes might continue even on down from Western Avenue down High Street all the way to Main Street, that it would be appropriate to study the entire area. And that was a meeting of the minds between us and the VTrans staff. We're optimistic. Obviously, there's no guarantee. They have other competing needs around the state that they need to address, but they encouraged us to apply for this. We're optimistic that the town will receive these funds and be able to conduct this study.
Great. Complex issue, and I look forward to seeing the results of the study, if it is so approved through this grant application. Are there members of the community present tonight that would like to make questions or comments on this? No? Okay. I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Great.
I make a motion to approve the Planning Department's application for a $40,000 bike ped grant program from the Vermont Agency of Transportation's 2019 Bicycle and Pedestrian Program.
Great, thank you. Liz has made a motion regarding the grant application for the Western Avenue Bike Ped Scoping Study. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we're gonna move on now to another grant, which is the Municipal Roads Grant and Aid. And this is an acceptance and appropriation. Peter?
Steve is still with us.
Hello, Steve.
He wins the Endurance Award tonight.
Woo.
So the next 4 items are all public works related items. We're
Great.
glad to have Steve still here.
Get
I
cozy
think
over
the
there.
interpreters win the endurance award.
Always.
Also the BDC staff,
Fair enough.
volunteers, for sure.
Okay.
So I'm here tonight to request you to approve a grant. This is from the Department of Environmental Conservation through Windham Regional. And they've invited Brattleboro and other towns, you'll see on the list, to a grant and aid program. And there's a grant offered for Brattleboro, a base grant of $26,600 with a 20% match. It would be $6,650. The funding is to implement the best management practice on hydraulically connected road segments in compliance with the DEC Municipal Road General Permit. And what that means in simple terms is that's roads that have drainage that go directly into surface water, streams, lakes, ponds, or wetlands. So it's the roads that are directly affecting these waterways. And that's why there's this emphasis to pick out those particular sections of road. The Regional Planning Commission has helped to implement the program, and the funding is determined by the number of these roads that are hydraulically connected. So I'm requesting approval for, to accept this grant, which I think is going to be beneficial to us. We're currently working on the stormwater general permit. We have people out actually surveying pipes and determining what type of work's going to need to be done. So this money will actually enable us to make some of the improvements that would normally have to come out of our capital roads fund. So,
Important point. Thank you for that, Steve. Okay, are there questions on the board or comments regarding this municipal roads grant and aid?
Just one, very easy. So the 6,650 match
yes,
comes from us,
yes,
from our,
from our capital roads or stormwater,
Great.
will have to come out of Public Works budget.
yep.
But the total amount without the grant would have to come out of Public Works also, so this is very beneficial.
Yep.
Excellent. I'm not going to ask for community questions or comments because at this very second, there is no community in the room. So I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept and appropriate a $26,600 municipal roads grant in aid grant from the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation.
Excellent. Tim has made a motion regarding accepting and appropriating a $26,600 municipal road grants and aid grant. Woo. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Motion carries. Steve, still in the hot seat.
Okay, the next item is, again, is a grant, is Class 2 paving. Class 2 roads are, it's a certain classification where we receive extra funding. The road that we're looking at is Old Guilford Road. We requested to get some Class 2 paving money, and it looks like there's $41,600 available, and the road that we've chosen is Old Guilford Road, which is a Class 2 road. And so also this would come up with a 20% match, and that would come out of our capital paving account and would be incorporated with our bids. So the grant will provide the funds to resurface approximately 3/10 of a mile on Old Guilford Road. So I'm requesting approval to accept and appropriate from the Agency of Transportation Class 2 grant. for
Great.
paving.
Great, thank you. Questions or comments from the board on this Class 2 road paving grant or from the town manager? I always leave you out, Peter.
All right.
I'm sorry.
I haven't talked plenty.
God, Tim, Jesus. Never thought you were gonna run out. Okay. Still, we have no community, and so I will go ahead and entertain a motion
In the room.
in the room, but so much community elsewhere.
Thank you.
Okay. Motion, please.
Oh, I can do this one too.
This is hilarious.
Oh my God, where are we?
Jay, we're on Jay.
We're on J. I'll make a motion to accept and appropriate a Class 2 paving grant in the amount of $41,600 from the Vermont Agency of Transportation to pave approximately 3/10 of a mile of Old Guilford Road.
Excellent. After much suspense, Tim has made a motion to accept and appropriate a Class 2 road paving grant for Old Guilford Road. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. And Steve again.
Okay, the next set of bids that we have here is for the Highway Department capital paving bids. This year, $300,000 was approved at town meeting for capital road projects. The Department of Public Works put out a bid for the paving, and we came up with a bid of, a low bid of $279,315.20. Now, the roads that we're looking at paving this year are Oak Street, Green Street, Chestnut Hill, Esty Street, Fairview Street, Maple Street, and Old Guilford Road, which we just talked about in the grant. So there are 4 bids that received when we opened the bids on June 11th, and these are the results of the bids. Vermont Roadworks is from Brattleboro, Vermont. Their bid was $279,315.20. Northeast Paving from Westfield, Mass., $307,018. Warner Brothers from Sunderland, Mass., $345,160. And Johnson Asphalt Paving from Northfield, $382,998. We are recommending that we accept the low bid from Vermont Roadworks, the amount of $279,315.20.
Okay, excellent. Are there questions or comments from members of the board?
I'm trying.
You don't have to. Don't pressure yourself.
No, I don't. Do
Okay.
you have any additional comments?
I don't.
Would you stop just trying?
I bet
Tim's dying
Daniel
here.
would have a question.
Tim cannot live without questions or comments, and he's doing a really good job of managing that expectation. Okay, I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Excellent.
I make a motion to award the 2019 capital paving contract to Vermont Roadworks LLC of Brattleboro, Vermont, in the amount of $279,315.20.
All right, excellent. Liz has made a motion regarding the 2019 capital paving contract to Vermont Roadworks LLC of Brattleboro. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. And Steve?
So the next item is one of the loaders the Public Works Department has 2 loaders, and one of the loaders has had a breakdown, which is rather serious and rather expensive. So following the breakdown of our 2006 Volvo L70E loader, we transported it to the dealer to be diagnosed for repair. CRW Woods Corporation from Williston, Vermont determined that the transmission in the oil cooler had failed. The repair quote is $33,114.36. So alternatively, we considered the option to upgrade the loader, considering the age of the loader, and we received an estimate for that of $152,000.
Yikes.
The trade-in value is what they gave us, would only be $15,000. So then we did some research separate from CRW Woods to determine what is the value of that loader if it was repaired. And if we repair the loader, it looks like it will have a value of a minimum of $80,000 plus. So at this time, we recommend repairing this loader. The oil cooler, what happens is when the transmission failed, the oil cooler fails with it. And then there'll be other parts and components that would be replaced when they take this apart, because it's a major repair. So we're requesting approval to make the repairs and have CRW Wood do the repairs for $33,114.36.
Great. Okay.
I have a
Sounds
comment.
good. Yes, Liz.
I would like to commend the Public Works Department for this analysis of not assuming that a new loader was required and ultimately choosing to repair this one. It was a very interesting analysis, and I commend you for it.
Thank you.
I agree with Liz. Tim?
I'm speechless. I'm speechless at how much it costs just to repair this thing, but it seems reasonable.
Yeah.
But
What's also interesting is that the hydraulic transmission, they call it the core, they give us a credit of $14,000 once they take it out, so there's a value there too. So that shows you, and then that has to be rebuilt, and so it's expensive. They're a lot of our equipment is very specialized and it's expensive.
Yeah.
Great. Well, it's nice to have the option.
Yeah.
Good work on that.
Are there questions from community members?
Cricket.
There are not. I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you.
I make a motion to authorize the town manager, Peter Elwell, to enter into a contract in the amount of $33,114.35 with CRW Woods Corporation of Williston, Vermont, to repair the 2006 Volvo L70E loader.
Great. Okay, Liz has made a motion regarding loader repair. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. And Steve?
Okay, the last item I have is a highway truck 2 bid, which is a 1-ton truck with plow. And this is, what we did is looked at the state bid for these vehicles. And we're requesting that you consider accepting the state of Vermont bid price for a 1-ton truck with plow from Central Chrysler Jeep Dodge of Rainham, Mass. The state of Vermont bid price for this 1-ton Dodge Ram and plow is $41,326.31. We had budgeted $46,500 for the vehicle replacement in the 2019-20 highway budget. I'm requesting that we accept this bid from the Central Chrysler Jeep Dodge for 1-ton truck with plow for $41,326.31.
Okay, great. Questions or comments from members of the board?
I have a comment.
All right, Liz, take it.
I note that not only was this replacement approved by representative town meeting in its budget, but am I correct in assuming that it was also part of that big spreadsheet for capital expenditures over the next 20 years?
Yep.
And so it's consistent with all that long-range planning?
It is. It's long-range planning, and then it was what the board actually presented to town meeting, and then the town needed, approve
Right.
those items. So this is one of those items as we enter into the new budget season.
That's nice to see, thank you.
Great. Members of the community want to speak on this and maybe?
I have a question. Go figure. What happens to highway truck number 2?
Well, I just got a letter from the distributor from this, they'll offer us $15,000 for a trade-in, which I didn't know at the time of this memo. So we would take that $15,000 to reduce this overall price.
Great.
In the end, it will bring the total amount down to $27,895.
That's great.
So, but we don't always know that. And in this particular case, we're struggling to get delivery dates on these vehicles so we can use them for the winter and not have, these type of breakdowns on the existing equipment that we're getting rid of. So after this memo was done, I received the information just recently that we could have that trade-in, which what it would do is you're authorizing me for the $41,326, and then we would trade that vehicle in if that works.
Very good.
Great.
Okay, this time I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept the state of Vermont bid price of $41,326.31 for purchase of a 1-ton truck with plow from Central Chrysler Jeep Dodge of Rainham, Massachusetts.
Excellent. Tim has made a motion regarding the replacement pickup truck for Public Works. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, that's all the business I have tonight.
Well done, Steve. Woo. Thanks for hanging out.
Thanks for the good news, too.
Okay. Our next item is a replacement pickup truck for recreation parks. Peter?
The explanation of this is identical to what Steve just offered regarding the pickup truck for Public Works. The details are slightly different. This is, again, a heavy-duty pickup truck. It's an F-350, Ford F-350. It's a large vehicle. It's intended to be able to plow and do other heavy tasks beyond a typical personal pickup truck. The pricing is just about the same, even though it's a different model. It's provided also through the State of Vermont General Services contract. Total price $41,962, including in this case a $7,000 trade-in value on the existing truck that it is replacing. And this is below the budgeted amount of $46,500, which was indeed approved by Select Board and Town Meeting, consistent with the long-term plan. So we recommend your approval.
Excellent. Thank you, Peter. Are there questions or comments from members of the board on this truck?
No.
No.
I would say, as a reminder, when we're talking about heavy-duty vehicles, we are generally not, at this time, able to look at electric models because such models are hard to come by. And so we are,
Yes.
that is why you will not hear that brought up.
And it requires a really long extension cord, which we don't
That's
have.
enough out of you. It's enough. Members of the community have any questions or comments about this truck? Okay, I would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Great.
I make a motion to accept the State of Vermont bid price of $41,316.31 for the purchase of a 2019 Ford F-350 Super Cab with 6.2L gas engine with a Fisher plow, a 1.5-yard Fisher steel cast sander, and 96-month, 6,000-mile extended warranty from Formula Ford of Montpelier, Vermont.
Okay, great. Liz has made a motion regarding the replacement pickup trucks for Recreation and Parks Department. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we are now moving on to town committee and boards appointments, where we will discuss town committees and boards, in-house staff appointments, or positions, my apologies, and reappointment of the forest fire warden.
So you have information provided in your notebooks about the applicants for these various positions. One nuance is the weigher of coal position, where we've identified in the administrative report that in recent years the town had followed the state statute rather than our own charter and had allowed 2 weighers of coal. Historically, the town had a single weigher of coal in accordance with our charter. You, at your last meeting, appointed someone to be weigher of coal for the coming year, and you have, that was David Levenbach, and then you have Ryan Stratton, who is one of the current weighers of coal this past year, has applied for reappointment to that position. So we've advised you that it's at your discretion whether you wish to follow the town charter or the state statute. To the most technical interpretation, if this were a matter of greater import, would be that it would be better to follow the town charter, since it's a essentially ceremonial position in this day and age. If you chose to have 2 weighers of coal, you certainly could do that. It would be consistent with what we've done in the last few years, and it would be compliant with state statute.
Great. Okay.
And so this person really wants to be the weigher of coal.
Yes.
People fight over it. It's exciting.
It was empty for a while, though, wasn't it?
No. People, didn't we have 2 applicants?
Tim O'Connor was on it for a long time.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought there was somebody else too. Okay. All right, so we're going to be reviewing or reading out loud the committees. I'll just make a quick summary and then we can read. So we're going to be looking at appointments to the Arts Committee, the Design Review Committee, Fence Viewer, Honor Roll, Tree Advisory, and Weigher of Coal this evening will be the committees that we are taking a look at.
And then there also, after you're done with that process, there are a couple of other housekeeping matters related to staff appointments.
Great, thank you. Okay, would somebody like to make a nomination for the Arts Committee?
Oh, are we just going to go down the list?
I thought we were.
Oh, yeah, that's right, 'cause there's no-
an issue to resolve first.
We're not going to have to.
Okay.
I can just start
Yeah, if
reading.
you could go to, I always mess
Yep.
this part up. You're absolutely correct about just go down the
Take it as
list.
a slate of,
Mhm.
because we don't have competition.
You can do that.
Yep. Yep. So on the Arts Committee, we have Amy R.T. Balin and Joseph Rivera. That's 2 out of 4 vacancies. For the Design Review Committee, we have Barbara George. For the fence viewer, we have Lee Madden, and that's one of 2 available. I neglected to do that. For the honor roll, Richard Campbell, and that's just 1 available position. And then Tree Advisory Committee, Georgia Morgan stepping up for 1 of 2 seats. And Weir of Coal, can I go ahead and just throw that in there?
You got it.
Ryan Stratton for the 2nd Weir of Coal.
Okay. Very good. Should we move on to discussing the in-house staff positions before doing any kind of?
No, I think it'd be appropriate for you to take
Okay.
the vote on
Yeah, I
that
like
slate
that. Okay.
first.
So I would entertain a motion on the slate as presented by Tim Wessel. All
I
those-
would like to make a motion that we accept this slate stated by Tim Wessel.
Excellent.
Thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Now we will move on to in-house staff positions. Which I need to get to, sorry. We're so close. Every moment we're getting closer.
Push. So, so for the staff positions, I am annually reappointed in accordance with the town charter to be the collector of taxes for a 1-year term. And the Public Works Director, Steve Barrett, is annually reappointed as the Road Commissioner for a 1-year term. And then there's a reappointment we're requesting this evening, Fire Chief Michael Bacassi to be Brattleboro's Town Forest Fire Warden for a 5-year term.
Oh, but Steve Barrett isn't here.
Well, then we get to give them more positions. What else do we have?
Oh, that's it.
Okay.
Shall I make a motion?
Yes, that'd be great.
I make a motion that we reappoint Town Manager Peter Elwell to be Collector of Taxes for a 1-year term.
Do them one at a time.
Okay.
Unless you want me to read them all.
No, I think that's fine. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I just think that sounds not like a fun title. Okay. Are there more?
Oh, yes, I'll make a motion to reappoint Public Works Director Steve Barrett as Road Commissioner for a 1-year term.
Okay. Tim has made that motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Sorry. Sorry, I'm holding in my coughs. I also agree. Any opposed? Motion carries.
I have a motion. I make a motion to reappoint as Fire Chief Michael Bacassi as Brattleboro's Town Forest Fire Warden for a 5-year term.
Excellent. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? No. Motion carries. All right.
Okay,
That-
sign this and we're done.
Very good. That is the end of our business. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Great. All those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.
Thanks, BCTV.
What's happening? I'm here.
Thanks, Fourth Estate.
From a several-day vacation and pinpointed.
I got lucky.
You've been playing,
This one I
you've
did.
been studying.
All of my
I
days.
got lucky.